Hi, everybody, and thanks for attending today's webinar. Introducing Chef Desktop, Manage and Secure Laptops and Desktops with Chef. My name is Erin, and I'm on the marketing team here at Chef, and I am happy to introduce today's speakers on this webinar as Alan Baptista, Product Marketing Manager, and Nick Rykar, Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager here at Chef. And we also have Jeff Vogt and Jim Kulte as Solutions Architects here at Chef as well. So before I turn it over to these four, I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A section at any time. And we will probably be fielding questions at the end of the presentation, maybe throughout if it's pertinent to whatever is happening during the presentation. For the best viewing experience, we recommend closing any additional programs or browser sessions running in the background, as webinars are bandwidth intensive. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and an on-demand version of the presentation will be available by tomorrow. So for those of you just joining, welcome to today's presentation, Introducing Chef Desktop, Manage and Secure Laptops and Desktops with Chef. Let's go ahead and get started. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Erin. Appreciate it. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this launching of Chef Desktop. We did launch this product on June 2nd at our Chef conference. And if you attended that, you'll see some of the similar messages and imagery that we showcased there. But now we have a panel of experts that will also help dive a little deeper into the nitty-gritty of the tool and have some geek outs time at the end. So send those questions out and we'd love to hear from you. Before we go in, let's do some of the kind of setting up the scenario here of some of the current trends that we see affecting or impacting the desktop management arena, where we see that 90% of enterprises will need to shift to strategic approaches to automation. And 60% of them, so basically what we're saying is the automation has been going on, and there's some for a level of years, and a lot of the complexity of the development and deployment further and is becoming a reality. The amount of and types of automation that needs are diversifying in many ways, and the shift the management of that automation is shifting to a team and taking very much a development approach, which is typically led by a automation architect at this point. So automation is clearly a trend that is going to impact this, and even Gartner says that by 2020, 90% of the organizations will have that. Gartner also identifies top 10 trends that are impacting I&O infrastructure and automation and operations. In one of them, I think the infrastructure is everywhere, and so is the data. So what they're extending, what they're essentially saying is that everything is moving to the edge, where in this case, they're estimating that by 2022, that's only 2 years away, 60% of organizations will have transitioned to from data centers to a more centers of data, where essentially to the edge. And in more recent study done by Wills Towers Watson, a survey of 158 US companies, stated that nearly half of them, 46% of them, are implementing some level of work from home. And several organizations are already stating that those work from homes are extending even beyond the COVID timeframe, that the productivity has increased and the cost of maintaining an office has decreased. So it's very attractive for organizations to really keep that work from home. And how does that impact this solution is remote management of devices and IT resources is very complicated and complex, because it's just the numbers games. It just increases exponentially the amount that is needed to manage these. So what are organizations really doing? They're trying to find efficiencies. They're trying to eliminate these manual processes in click and point, and trying to automate um, these processes for efficiencies. Um, and they're trying to accommodate a range of devices. Not only um, many organizations have a hybrid set of devices where they may have, a set of PCs, Windows based, or they have another set of Mac OS type of devices, and in some cases they all have Linux devices. So managing these remotely in an automated fashion is very complicated and time consuming, because you have to have different tools that you're using. Um, and by consequence, because you're using different tools, there is a lack of a comprehensive visibility across the organization. You can't really have a single pane of glass where you're seeing the status and the configuration status of all these devices. So they're always seeking an easier, more automated, more efficient way to maintain this large number of devices. And that's really a reality that has increased exponentially with COVID. And also looking is they're trying to reduce risk, because it is difficult to deploy and manage these thousands of devices and laptops, because it's a very point and click kind of scenario up to this point. It's hard to maintain this vast set of devices under continuous compliance. And they are looking for a dynamic way to really enforce not only industry standard compliance, but also enterprise level security and compliance standards. And they're looking for an easy way to establish these, what we put air quotes there, risk profiles for any given IT resource. And this lends itself to a little bit of zero trust. And I think we'll cover that in our question and answer portion as well. So what we also see, so we'd like to introduce to you Chef Desktop. And it's really a way for us to empower IT resource managers through a level of automation. Chef is known for our automation and our efficiency driving automation efforts. So that is kind of a natural progression that we're seeing. We want to help organizations gain control and of this sprawling set of IT resources, and obviously reduce the risk and security compliance issues of their fleet. What we're essentially trying to do here is what Agile has done for software development and DevOps is doing for operations. We're trying to bring that level of thinking to IT resource managers. So in that line of pipeline automation through code, something that can be codified and efficiently managed from a single pane of glass. With that said, we are trying to drive efficiency through automation by allowing that automation to happen through code. On the right-hand side there, you see our standard Ruby language, but also YAML on the bottom pane of glass to really try and simplify the access point. So you have the flexibility of using Ruby in the Chef cookbooks, or you could use a simplified version straight out of the box in YAML. We are also providing templated content that is set for different servers and different software or different devices and different operating systems. You're able to manage a company-wide fleet regardless of the operating system. So we support Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So it's the diversity all through a single device. You're able to detect changes in your desired state. You're able to have change control and correct those configuration drifts as they occur. You have an extensible configuration control, so you can create different profiles, different configuration profiles by specific needs. You can create a set of images and a set of standards for your developers, for instance, or you can transition a different configuration profile for your finance people and for your HR people or for your sales team. So those risk profiles can be modified and implemented across the board in a standard, very efficient manner. And it also allows you to configure and manage what we're calling non-traditional setups, which is especially powerful for air-gapped type of devices, and which allows you to the flexibility to maximize the efficiency of your development through this automation. And more importantly, you gain visibility, this consistent visibility in a single pane of glass, and continuously have the visibility of your configuration status throughout this dispersed different type of OS operating system. You're able to drill down into views and layers, and I think we'll showcase some of that in a little bit. But you're also able to pre-group like information, and that could include check, type of devices that you're using, their status or error conditions. Those are all things that can be grouped and visualized. And you can also, from that kind of visibility pane of glass, you're also able to correct any necessary configuration drifts straight from there. So in terms of risk support, we also have a level of compliance, a continuous compliance capability. We're consistently enforcing the security, maybe an industry level security compliance or the company policies. You're able to extensively cover what you're doing for your servers. You're now able to cover your compliance for your devices. And you're able to also create these custom profiles depending on your enterprise needs. You're able to continuously detect the status, but also correct those drifts from compliance that you may see happen throughout time through all this automated remediation. That's also a capability and a functionality here. So in terms of some of the supported features, and one of my favorite ones is this zero touch enrollment and provisioning that happen. You're able to automate software and app deployment through this device. You're able to automate policy setting with fine-tuning capabilities. And also, you're able to have this consolidated dashboard and visibility. You have transparent device known state. You're easily onboarding the chef-created content, which is what I said in terms of the pre-packaging of those devices. Again, the supported platforms that we have are in Windows and Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. In terms of flavors that we have for Chef Desktop, we have a basic entry level that allows you to have the configuration management functionality of the tool, all based with CIS centered and chef curated content, but also a more advanced Chef Desktop compliance option where you have not only the configuration and observability that you saw in the dashboard, but also security policy and compliance capability or content that are provided as well. Any thoughts there, guys? So Chef Desktop Management is really kind of the automation, provisioning and management and configuration management of the tool, like I said. And also Chef Desktop Compliance allows you to automate the compliance and audit capabilities of the tool. So you extend not only the management capability, but also the configuration, not only extend the configuration portion of it, but also the auditability, the testability, and the compliance management of that. Before we go on to demos, I want to showcase some of the use cases that we've seen our customers already considering using, and we've already signed up a few customers since we had our official launch as well, and some are actually customers in beta. But they're looking to really drive control, compliance, and efficiency. We have customers that use Chef Desktop to allow them to configure the laptops and desktops according to their specific employee need groups, but also others have enabled customers to maintain a desired state and control drifts from their desired state and really track the audit and have trackability and audit compliance, which is an incredible feature for this mentality. So again, we're trying to drive that mentality of automation through codifying features and really automating in a very efficient manner, really trying to manage that laptop configuration and compliance through automation, allowing for employee productivity efficiently, being in not having to wait 90 days in many cases for developers to have full control of their devices and access to all the systems that they need. So very efficient way to hit the ground running for new employees, for instance.
Alan, I just want to add, so I work with some of the existing customers that are using Chef Desktop. And I just want to point out that desktop, using Chef for desktop machines is not by any means a new pattern. You look at companies like Facebook who manage upwards of 100,000 devices with a team of 5. They've been doing that with Chef for I don't know how many years, at least 5+ years. And Uber's, one of our newest customers, and they've been using Chef for desktop for a very long time as well. And it really is centered around efficiency. If you look at the pattern of using Chef to manage machines in a data center, that's something that's existed for somewhere around 10 years. But prior to that, it was all just manual configuration and scripts, and then tools like CF Engine came around and Puppet came around, and Chef came around. That trend is starting to happen on the desktop side as well. There's more and more devices that need to be reliably delivered change to, and the idea of making sure your laptops are compliant with your security policies, just like the data center, is becoming more and more important. So Chef Desktop is a new product that addresses some gaps in Chef, but the idea of managing laptops with Chef is by no means new.
I think in line with that question, there's actually a question on the Q&A panel already. Does desktop, so in the past, they've had a hard time with hardware-specific drivers, for example, payment pads or printers and kiosks using traditional Chef recipes. Does desktop contemplate an approach for this? And I think we have a kiosk solution, if I'm recalling it correctly, but it is really it's really for device. It's a single purpose type of computer station, right? It would be a check-in station at a school, or it would be a card reference check-in system at a library type of setting. I'm not sure how we use beyond the laptop and desktop.
Well, I saw that question, and I think I'd want to know a little bit more information from the person that asked it. But if you think about the job of Chef's job is to describe the state that a machine should be in, and that's usually what software is installed, what services should be running, what configuration file content should exist. And then the idea of using Chef at scale is all about how can you author a change, test that change, and then reliably deliver that change. And kiosks are one of those places that you need to make sure your code's going to work 100% before you deliver it. And the process of authoring, testing, and delivering Chef is very supportive of that. So I don't know the specific answer about which drivers they've had trouble with delivering to those machines, but when those machines are scattered all over the country or the world, you need a good piece of tooling to actually be able to author that change and test it and then deliver it. And so the Chef recipes that come with the desktop resource pack do include some kind of newer features around using Chef in a desktop environment. There's Mac specific and Windows specific resources that may work for these hardware specific drivers.
Yeah, I think like yeah, my thought exactly. Like I don't know like how much doing direct like DLL management will have changed, but there's certainly a lot of new options even outside of the desktop offering, depending on what version of Chef you're using for doing things like making use of PowerShell, DSC, WSUS, etc. There are some resources for using Gorilla to do app management as well inside of the desktop packages themselves. So I'd say the trend line has gotten easier over time, specifics notwithstanding.
Content is king. Content is king.
And I can answer Naveen's question about MDM. So at launch, we're not.
So the question is, for those that can't see, the question is Chef Desktop going to be an MDM solution as well?
Thank you. I realize that people can't see the questions. I'm used to just normal Zooms. So right now we work with MDMs like Micro MDM, Microsoft Intune, and I believe there's one on Azure as well. So realistically, we'd work with any MDM because the idea is, your MDM is what sort of configures a machine out of the box to be a machine that's owned by your organization. And usually with most MDMs, there's a step to installing software. And we think that the software installation step is, the point where you install Chef Client and get it registered with a Chef server, just like you would bootstrap a node in a data center. From that point forward, you're under Chef management, and the MDM is just an inventory tool at that point. I don't know if our plans in the future are going to end up with an MDM solution, but right now we work with MDMs.
Cool. There's one more question here, Nick. In terms of show and tell, you're up first. So, do you want to take that question as we're doing it, or
I sure
wait till the
can,
end?
especially since the question is closer to my domain expertise. The question was how Chef Desktop works with the Chocolatey package management system, and that's actually, I believe, a native resource in Chef right now, Chocolatey package. And correct me if I'm wrong, field folks. I think it's even the default execution for the platform non-sensitive package resource in Windows. Although I'm less confident on that one. At the very least, Chocolatey package is definitely an option, maybe the default on Windows even these days. But yep, it is supported. Beyond that, so we mentioned that a part of this solution is just providing some more desktop and laptop specific resources inside of the Chef Infra language. And so part of the solution comes packaged with this cookbook I'm looking at here, which has a bunch of examples on how to use this new policy. So what we're seeing here is an example of Mac OS policy where we're setting up the Chef client to run. We're setting our password policy. We're using Monkey in the case of Mac OS and Gorilla in the case of Windows for some app management. And then some, niceties for power management, software updates, encryption, et cetera, so that these can be turned on and off fairly plainly with sort of the same syntax as any other Chef Infra resource. Same deal on the Windows side, setting screensaver policies, disk encryption, et cetera. And as of Chef Infra Client 16, we also have YAML support for our resources. So there is a YAML version of each of these recipes as well. And this is the exact same policy, just formatted and organized in a different way. As far as what things look like on the visualization side, there is a new desktop dashboard that's a part of Chef Automate. And so you can actually see here in the Automate docs, we have some guidance on how to set things up. For the high level, for anyone who's deployed Chef Automate before, there is a new -- product desktop flag that can be set during the initial configuration. And that will go ahead and enable this dashboard. So the key thing here, and I think Jeff spoke to this a moment ago, is that the problems being solved by desktop are not necessarily new to Chef or Chef Infra. That said, when you start looking at how we want to aggregate that data and what information is most important, that actually does change a little bit. We want to be cognizant of that. The big difference, and I think kind of as showcased through the MDM conversation, is that I am not taking for granted, as I am with traditional servers sitting in a NOC or a cloud, that I have an always on piece of infrastructure that I'm going to be able to connect to over SSH or WinRM. This is something that's going to be in somebody's house. That somebody may or may not be a person who is technically managing that thing. I may just need to provision it and mail it out, certainly in the post-pandemic world. And so being able to know not only that machines have been configured, but when they last checked in. I turn my machine off for the weekend and I load it back up on Monday. I want to make sure I get any new policy changes that have come in the intervening time. So to that end, we can go ahead and take a look at our daily stats. We know that for today, I don't have a lot of machines that have checked in my little sample set here, but I can go ahead and take a look at some of the data for how many machines have not checked in a really long time. So I see a lot of machines haven't checked in 3 days, and as we go to a longer and longer stretch of time, smaller subsets of my machines that haven't seen changes. We can go ahead and look at aggregated check-in history as well, so I can see sort of how things have varied over the past 7 days. If I go back even further, you can get a good idea of when I started importing data into this system. And we can also look at things like trends in errors. So when you have machines that are having some kind of problem running through their configuration policy, we can take a look at the top errors here and even see sort of how they break down by platform, by version, et cetera, as well as the individual node details. With their full check-in history, I can see that this one hasn't checked in yet today, but I can take a look at sort of when nothing had to change, when policy was updated, and when errors occurred throughout its check-in history. I can also see sort of the node overview information. Which machine is this? What Chef infra server is it talking to? And some information about its system and infrastructure. And that's sort of the high level. We can always, of course, get the more detailed picture of what happens on each check-in in our infrastructure view. So if we wanted to go ahead and take a look at the nature of a failure, this is all sort of dummy data that I imported in my local test instance, but it looks pretty much exactly the same as it might look otherwise. I can see here an undefined method. I can get the full stack trace of what actually errored out on the run and can diagnose and try to fix things accordingly. But that's sort of the high level. I want to keep this kind of up and running as we go through the roundtable conversation, questions and answers, but I've been sort of talking to my cohorts here, thinking about this as kind of my interactive whiteboard while we have our discussion. So if we want to take a look at anything, we have that option. But I guess to kick things off, have any new questions come in while I've been flapping my gums?
There's one that says, apparently this person has already been using Chef for desktop management. Mm-hmm. Should they move to this product? I guess it depends, right?
Yeah, I think, the two words everyone hates hearing from an engineer, but I think that sort of what you end up getting is for one, you get sort of that different view that you can sort of aggregate and view data in, as well as the resources provided there. So, if you've already, either written scripts or done, other implementations for things like, setting password policy and screensavers, that will continue to work. But the biggest benefit I would say to moving over is that you just get a lot more sort of Chef native syntax for a lot of the common day-to-day tasks that you need to perform that otherwise you might have to, go write PowerShell or Bash scripts or, similar things to do historically.
Yeah, and I think if you're using the open source pattern, I guess is the good way to say it, that the reality is that is still community supported. If you're looking for content that is maintained and tested and validated from a Chef engineering development perspective, then yes, you should consider moving over. And the functionality and the visibility components are part of this solution, which Nick had talked about in terms of the dashboard. So that's why I think it depends. So if you're interested, have a conversation with your account team, and we'll gladly kind of dive a little deeper into the distinguished differences between what you're doing now and where we're taking this product in the future. Okay, I have a question, just a generic one for now. Why is Chef venturing into desktop management? To any one of the panelists, why do you think Chef should be kind of venturing off to this? I have an opinion if you don't, but I'll let you guys speak. So why is Chef venturing into desktop management?
Well, I think I kind of said it before, there's kind of the same culture change on the, desktop and IT management side as there was in the data center about 10 years ago. And it's a realization of the value of automation, really. The value of doing your work in code, collaborating with tools like Git, making a change in a branch and doing a pull request and having a pipeline test that change and deliver it. We're just starting to see more and more, tech savvy, tech first companies, recognizing the value of that. And not only, not only the value of doing things in code, but the idea that you can use a tool that scales well, that is cross-platform, that gives you the ability to not only manage, the operation of a desktop, but validate with tests the compliance health of a desktop, and then combine the two in one change pipeline and in one dashboard, one pane of glass for visibility. There's a lot of value from a perspective of, the individual contributor, the IT operator. So, we recognize that, and we decided that we should start investing time and money into a product that, people can actually get more value out of than just trying to use a data center tool in their desktop environment.
Yeah, no, I think hard agree. And from my, and I'm on the technical marketing side of Chef. So I work with Alan. And from my perspective, it really does sort of draw a line between sort of the engine and the outcome. Because I think what's unique about something like Chef Desktop is that it does not represent a new engine in the way that, when we released Chef Habitat, we have a way to manage applications that is unique and different from Chef Inspec and Chef Infra. This is largely Chef Infra and Chef Inspec under the hood, but sort of catered to the specifics of the particular outcome, which is to say, the things I need to do don't change between server management and desktop management. I need to enforce configuration. I need to validate that configuration, but the unique things about the outcome are different. There are different types of configurations I'm affecting and different high-level data that's of interest. So I kind of, the same way that I see something like, compliance management and security management and testing is kind of all the same thing, right? I'm testing a real system against an expectation. That's sort of the same kind of flow for me, where I'm managing configurations, but now I'm tailoring how I do that to a specific outcome. So it's really like Jeff was saying before, we could already do it. Now we're doing it in a much more kind of productized and focused way towards the needs of that particular use case.
Yeah, and to build on what you both have said, the needs of desktop configuration, I think, can vary drastically from server configuration. Obviously, most servers don't have displays on them, so we don't care about screensavers. So specific resources that are tailored for desktop use are a huge part of what the desktop product does. And then the desktop management dashboard is, I think, a lot of insight that, again, server admins probably don't even worry about. You're not worried about when the last time it converged is, because it's always on, versus a desktop that you might care if that hasn't been seen in 7 days, or you might not because the person who has it might be on vacation. So very, very different amounts of information that you might need to get, and we're compiling all of that together.
I think that kind of alludes to the question that came up here is why the decision to split resource on a desktop versus infra compared to adding these resources to infra? How are resources which touch both products going to be maintained?
Well,
I guess the distinction there is between infra and desktop in terms of managing and operationalizing.
I can add one point of clarity. So when we talk about Chef Desktop as a product, what we're talking about is the addition of this dashboard to the Chef Automate server. We're also talking about the Chef Desktop resource pack, which is available as a cookbook. So there's a content delivery mechanism if you're a customer where you can subscribe to the latest version of this cookbook. And when you include it on a run list, it lets you execute recipes like Nick was showing on the screen. I'm sorry, it lets you execute resources. So the idea behind that is we wanted to make that resource pack something that is not part of Core Chef. It's something that's dedicated specific to a desktop environment instead of adding it to Core Chef, which then becomes deployed out to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of machines. In this case, you can carve out desktop resources specifically for your desktop machines. But there's no overlap. There's not like a desktop product and a Chef Infra product that are separate command line tools, separate Ruby libraries. Desktop is just a cookbook that you add into a normal Chef client environment.
Yeah. And I think, like, to that point, a lot of the resources that we'd be using for day-to-day desktop management are already a part of kind of Core Chef. And so the pattern is, I think, at least in my head, not altogether dissimilar to the way a lot of the resources have been added to our kit over time, where there used to be things like the Windows or the Build Essential cookbook that you would need to include to use some of those resources. As for, whether those end up getting folded into Core Chef at some point in the future, I don't know that I could speak to that. I don't know how specific the plans are that far out. But generally speaking, that bifurcation is really just sort of an addition on top of a core library rather than, to, like Jeff said, a completely different developmental path that sort of forks and splits things off. So it is additive and not sort of duplicative, if that makes sense.
Very cool. Very cool. Here's one that came in. How are you testing desktop OSs? This particular person runs Test Kitchen against AWS, and they don't have desktop OSs.
So I can only speak to myself locally. I'd have to check with the team to see how they are doing things. But I have been sort of doing testing against sort of custom built VirtualBox images. So I have a Mac OS and a Windows 10 image that I'll sort of spin up and do whatever kind of run through the cookbook. I've also sort of hooked it up to, I think in our team's case, an Azure account so that I can have my little test kitchen instance get hooked into the MDM and auto bootstrapped and all that fun stuff. As far as what we're doing more formally, that's something, unless any of my colleagues here know, that I might have to check in on and get back to folks about.
Right now, that is kind of what we're doing as well. Nick, is a lot of local development. So VMware, VirtualBox, things like that locally on local systems. We've also done some testing on ESX for kind of almost local development and bootstrapping those. So we've got some Mac minis and things that we've spun up for that. And then we also are looking into the Azure portion of that, because they actually do have some pipeline development tools that will actually spin up a desktop system and run your cookbooks against that. So we've been delving into that as well. So there's a bunch of different options for testing. I've also done the good old fashioned, hey, this is our test box over here. And so you've got, if it's a Windows laptop or a MacBook Air or something like that, that you just continuously wipe and refresh and run your tests on that. And it's part of your policy group there.
Yeah, I've gotten real versed at booting my my local VMs from an ISO so I can nuke and pave them easily.
Snapshots are your friend.
Yeah, that and hijacking the whatchamacallit serial number MAC address and all that for
Yes.
MDM have been key tools for me to learn in the past couple months.
I will say one of my customers is effectively using the Azure DevOps Mac OS build agent for testing on Mac OS. So essentially they have a pipeline for their chef code, and they spin up a Mac OS node and push their chef code to it and execute chef and evaluate whether chef actually did what it should do. And then they run inspec after that execution of chef to validate that chef made the changes it should do, and then they tear down that build agent. So it's effectively the same workflow as Test Kitchen, but just without using the Test Kitchen tools.
Cool, cool. And meanwhile, I've shuffled up our backgrounds for a bit, and we'll keep this up until we need to go back to anything if need be. But there is an overview on the Chef Desktop product page. The YouTube link there will get you to the video demo I did for ChefConf, which is a bit more in depth and touches on some of the zero touch stuff, and the zero trust webinar that talks a little bit about doing endpoint security behind the firewall.
Yes, so for those new questions, please keep sending them in. I see two more here, but there's one that I want to make sure we address. And what does Chef Desktop do that is different than what is out there in the marketplace? I know, Jim, you have some experience with some Windows or not Windows, but some Mac equivalent. What's the distinction there for a Mac only type of tool?
For a Mac only tool, and honestly, even delving a little bit into the Windows and Linux, it's our dashboard, the automate view into a single pane of glass that you can view the status of your entire fleet. I know things like tools like Jamf or Microsoft SCCM, they can do a little bit of that, but Jamf is obviously only Mac. So if you have Macs, they're managed on one side of things and Windows is managed on the other side of the house. Our automate dashboard can give you a full view into the configuration status and the security status of your entire fleet, which is really, really nice. Getting that information at the tips of your fingers is something that is, I know, as a former Jamf admin, has always been a challenge for me when requested information. Our security side of things is also built directly into that. So we've got a compliance view that we can test against curated and CIS validated profiles. So we've got a lot of tools in there that are outside of what the existing kind of MDM platforms do a lot of the time.
Yeah, and actually to that point, I think it's worth noting that a lot of the genesis of the suite of tools itself evolved out of our own internal laptop management at Chef. And in fact, one of the core contributors to this project was IT admin that was figuring out how to expand beyond what he had started doing. I believe it was in Jamf as well for our Chef laptops, and started poking around Chef Infra, and one thing led to another, and suddenly we've got this product.
Yeah, and it goes beyond, I think, is two points that Jim made is the visibility capability of it, and the fact that we're automating this in a way that other tools can't. And thirdly is the compliance perspective that none of the organizations or similar tools have in the way we're doing it. So we're really kind of differentiating in the way we provide it through automation, through code, the visibility and the single pane of glass, for different tools and their status, and thirdly the compliance aspect of it as well. So that's a great point. How does Chef Desktop help kind of in that line help secure and keep the remote desktop fleet compliant? That one goes to Jeff. And in that vein also, how it may help kind of zero trust, put some zero trust kind of sprinkle on it, because that zero trust webinar is one that you did. So why don't you give us kind of the comprehensive answer there, how we help keep systems compliant, and how it may be a first step in the direction of a zero trust
Right.
journey.
So for those listening that aren't too familiar with zero trust is this idea of having authentication onto two sensitive resources on your network, that the authentication is more than just a measurement if you have the right username and password, right? So traditional security is open laptop, type in credentials, and log into some sort of VPN or some sort of single sign-on. They added two-factor auth as kind of the next best form of security, but zero trust is more than that. Zero trust is a measurement of your device health, amongst other things. Imagine a scenario where you need to log into the VPN, but before your authentication gateway will allow you to log in, it validates things like, is that laptop, a corporate laptop? Has it run any compliance tests recently? Is it patched? Is the disk encrypted? So when you want to marry that pattern to an environment where you're using Chef to manage a laptop, if you're using Chef to deploy hardening resources, and you're using Inspect to validate that maybe you are CIS level 1 compliant, all of that data flows back to the Chef server or the Chef Automate server and is available by API. So we've got customers that have integrated their auth into the Chef Automate API to run those real-time checks. So at the time of access, the authorization mechanism, the SSO gateway or the VPN, will query the Chef Automate server and say, is that a corporate-owned laptop that's trying to connect? Did it check into Chef within the last 6 hours? And is it passing all of our Inspect tests and not failing any critical controls? And only if all those conditions match, plus the password's correct, or plus the two-factor is the right token, then only then does it allow access to whatever resource that user's trying to reach. So the answer is, Chef, or I should say zero trust works best with very rich data about the device context. And Chef plus Inspect are tools that are going to produce that extremely rich data and make it accessible via API.
Yeah. No, and I think like what is kind of tangentially related and kind of I think speaks to another one of the unique qualities of managing endpoints versus servers is that if I'm managing a server with my automation tools, generally speaking, I don't even want anyone able to log into those servers. My automation tool should be in charge of anything that needs to happen to those. Not so with a machine that is designed to be used by a human. So it also I think helps even outside of very rigid compliance enforcement, even in a broader case, being able to help with, I think, the balancing act that a lot of organizations struggle with between making sure that endpoints are locked down, but also making sure that they're not inhibiting their employees or coworkers' ability to work. And so even if you have a case, right, where you're, letting people install software, or you have some restrictions that are not directly or rigidly enforced, you still have the ability to get insights and to enforce sort of emerging things like CVEs and the like, where I don't know whether or not, anyone downloaded, thing I just found out about today, but has had a vulnerability in it for 5 years. I can go ahead and inspect query if I want to get insights. I can go ahead and purge the artifacts themselves with the infra run and sort of everything in between. So I kind of get that ability to evolve my policy without necessarily having to completely lock down individual access unless that is my direct intent.
I think that's an interesting point, Nick, that what we're trying to say also, and I'm not sure if it was clear, is that Chef Desktop relies on our core products, right? It is a very much leveraging our existing tool set and our existing capability there. And I think in line with what you were saying, Nick, there's a question here that comes up is, will it be possible to use this in an environment that is already using Chef Infra, such as a hybrid environment where servers and desktop devices are being managed? I think there's a distinction both from a practical capability. Are you able to, but also should you, right?
Yeah, I would just, I mean, the practical answer is yes. It's to a Chef server, a desktop versus a node in a data center are the exact same thing. They both run Chef Infra client. They both report the same way. If they run inspec, it shows up the same way. But kind of from a should perspective, number one, I would say right now, if you were to deploy the dashboard, the desktop dashboard onto an Automate server that is already serving infranodes, you would see mixed information. You'd see infranodes on that desktop dashboard. And the reason is the prioritization of separating that type of data wasn't there. Right now, if you decided you wanted to start using Chef Desktop, we make it so easy to deploy a dedicated standalone Automate server that has the Chef server core built in. So it's really just, it's like a couple lines of configuration and one line to deploy it after you provision a server. And now you've got a dedicated server just for desktops. Now, the reason that it's sort of a best practice to keep those separate is there's just no overlap. There's no recipes that you're going to write for a data center or servers in a data center that you're going to also use on the desktop. Furthermore, the teams that are going to be managing them are likely to be different teams of people. And there's also no aggregate of data of health that maps to data center and desktop that gives you any actionable type of insight. But yes, you could share a Chef server and an Automate server, and it would all work, but we'd recommend having dedicated Chef Automate and Chef server combinations.
Great answer, thank you. And for those that are still wanting to post your questions, we're still here. Just keep those questions coming. And we have another one here coming in, and it's like, oh, here, new to Chef, so welcome. What is the UI tool for Chef to manage servers? I guess is it Automate that they're referring to, Nick?
Well, so I guess it depends. When it comes to sort of defining and setting policy, there is no active UI tool for that. Typically, what you're using things for in Chef Automate is sort of aggregation of reporting. That said, sort of the bootstrap process is pretty straightforward. For traditional infrastructure, it's typically done at provision time or on existing systems over SSH or WinRM. For systems like desktops, probably the most common paradigm I'd expect to see is integration with sort of whatever kind of MDM solution is out there, kind of getting the initial network join and batch of applications going. When it comes to defining and promoting the policy itself, there are a bunch of different ways to skin that cat. But generally speaking, you have sort of your policy is collected in what are called cookbooks. And those cookbooks define essentially which resources are run on a particular type of asset. And so those end up living in version control and getting uploaded to an artifact store. The most common ones for Chef policy being a Chef server, which is directly integrated with Chef Automate, or a Habitat Builder Depot, which is also integrated with Chef Automate. So either way you roll it, there's an easy way to get that policy from your laptop to wherever it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into more of the philosophy behind what Chef is trying to achieve with desktop. We've had success on the server side and infrastructure management side of things in this way of doing things where it's not a point and click, one person doing things process. It's an automated pipeline process where all of your changes are going in and being validated and tested. So that's where we kind of want to move the desktop. We think it'll be a big advantage, and we've seen a lot of our clients already taking advantage of it. And so we want to make that more accessible to everyone and help them get started on that journey. And that's really where we're trying to get to. And we've got some great people behind us that are helping us do that.
Yeah. I think the exception to that rule would be sort of ad hoc tasks for compliance and security scanning specifically, where we do have the ability to set up through the UI, API, or SSH or WinRM based scans. And I think the big difference there is that when you are doing that evaluation, you're not actually changing anything on the target system. You are very specifically just kind of getting a reckoning of current state and how far from your desired state that current state is. But yeah, generally speaking, if it's going to be making config changes, we are very heavily promoting kind of pipelining those changes out so that you don't end up losing the audit trail for any policy change over time.
Cool. Well, we think we have a few more minutes. I don't see any more questions, and we'll wait for a couple. Here we go. Another one coming in. I guess it's a follow-up. The issue is that I see here a nice UI for Chef Desktop, looking for nice UI for the server management. Okay, fair point. Will definitely be the learnings that we'll have in Chef Desktop. I bet will be transferred to the enterprise capability and service management, server management capability in the future.
Yeah,
Another
I think
question.
a little bit off topic for this webinar, but for what it's worth, we haven't dug into, there is a dedicated infrastructure panel that is sort of the traditional server infrastructure management system, where we can go ahead and look at results, filter things out by attributes. Quick plug as well, another thing that we announced at ChefConf and is now live in the ServiceNow store is a ServiceNow CMDB integration, so that all of this data can get shipped off to your ITSM platform as well. So kind of giving you that the dashboards and operational insights you need wherever you need them.
But yeah, what Nick is showing on his screen here is Chef Automate, and that's the product that's been around for 3 years and is the de facto UI and health visualization tool for your data center. And Desktop is an addition to that product. So that's what we were focused on.
Very cool. So there's a follow-up question here for Desktop. How does it compare to oh, I'm sorry, Nick, you were finishing up.
No, just filtering things out in the filter thing for funsies.
To show it. Okay.
Yeah.
For Desktop, how do you compare to Microsoft Intune? And I think that's an MDM, right?
Yeah, so I think like in that case, it's a little bit apples to oranges, but typically what you'd be using is having something like Intune for Microsoft, or I think it's Micro MDM and Mac side of things, be the thing that installs the Chef Infra client for the desktop management, so that essentially it's there for lack of a better term, your provisioning side of things, and then sort of the management itself is handled via the Chef Desktop product.
And it takes over from there, right? It's just
right.
that first kickoff to install Chef Desktop into the system, and then we take over from there. Okay, fair enough. Any closing thoughts, Jim?
No, I think we covered mostly everything. I just want to say, as a former Jamf admin, I really like the desktop product and the dashboard in particular. It gives a lot of information that I was missing from that aspect.
Very cool. Jeff, any thoughts? Any closing thoughts there?
I mean, nothing that really comes to mind. I think, you know, I'd echo Jim. I haven't had experience with Jamf, but I've talked to a lot of customers that have used tools like Group Policy and Jamf, and what you hear from them is at a certain point we end up writing scripts because we don't get all the functionality in those tools. And then once you start writing scripts, you're just down that path of having to make them work across multiple operating systems. How do you know, test and deploy them? And you end up realizing that, you know, a config management tool is the correct tool, and a pipeline that works off of, you know, pull requests and Git and uses tools like Test Kitchen or ephemeral machines to test. I mean, all of that just starts making sense once you really figure out everything you need to do. So that's essentially, you know, where Chef fits in, and the desktop product and pipe and dashboard and resource pack just kind of illustrate our commitment to starting to actually grow the engineering team around that and supporting that use case.
Great. Nick, any thoughts, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of similar to Jeff, I'm newer to the desktop and laptop management side of things, but I think this sort of takes a trend that we've had at Chef for a while now and iterates on it further, which is kind of having a uniform way of talking about automation for different types of stakeholders. So when I was talking about like engine versus outcome, the outcome's new to me, but the engine isn't. And by virtue of my understanding the way Chef automates things, it's really allowed me to kind of better understand the concerns and processes for managing new workloads without having to take on a new cognitive load. And I think kind of as we spread out, we've seen the same thing in InSpec for security, compliance, and operations. And I kind of see that being an ongoing theme of one way to automate, many things to automate.
All right. Can you hear me, guys? Okay. Yeah, I lost connectivity there for a second. Great points. My closing thoughts are, if you are a current Chef customer and you're interested in more information, you are welcome to reach out to your customer success team or account team or any of our field technicians or our field sales. If you're new to Chef, welcome, and take a look at this content that Nick is showing there. The Chef desktop page has tons of more information. There is the demo that's quite in depth that Nick shared during Chef Conf. It's really engaging and interesting. It's really short. It's under 10 minutes. And if you're more interested in what Jeff was talking about in terms of zero trust, there's a whole webinar on that topic. So thank you for attending this webinar. We really appreciate your interest. And I believe there will be follow-up emails that we'll be sending out the link once it is posted and available for you to share. So if you're interested, please do share the webinar, and hope to see you soon. Erin?
All right. Yep, just like An said, we'll be sending out the recording tomorrow via email, and you can access it again, rewatch, share out as you please. So thanks again, everybody, for attending today. Thanks all for a great packed hour, and we will see you next time.